All right, let's dive into a game plan for life. This isn't something new. It's a strategy that's been tested for centuries. It comes right from the Carmelite tradition. And you know what? It's a really powerful framework for getting something most of us are looking for: real inner peace and a sense of self-mastery. Let's see how it all works. So, let's start with the really big question. We spend so much time and energy fighting battles out there, at our jobs, in our families, with the world. But what if the biggest, most important challenge we'll ever face isn't external at all? What if it's happening right here, inside of us? That idea is really the key to everything we're about to talk about. And the stakes for this internal journey? Well, they're incredibly high. According to this tradition, the quest for self-mastery isn't just some nice self-help project. It's actually considered the single most important thing a person can do, not just for themselves, but for aligning with a much higher purpose. That's a pretty bold claim, right? Now, that word perfection, it can be a little scary. It makes us think we have to be totally flawless, which, let's be real, is impossible. But this framework completely changes the goalposts. Perfection here isn't about never messing up. It's about connection. It's a state of perfect union with the good, and it's achieved through selfless love. So the goal isn't being perfect, it's about loving perfectly. That's a huge difference. Okay, so that's the goal. But how in the world do we get there? How do we actually start moving in that direction? Well, the game plan breaks it all down into 3 essential pillars of our own effort. This is the practical, nuts and bolts part of the strategy. It really happens in 3 stages. First up is education. You gotta learn the rules of the game. You have to understand what you're aiming for. Second, you have deliberate acts. This is the practice, the workout. It's about actively and repeatedly choosing the good. And third, and this is crucial, is perseverance. Look, you are going to fall down. The key is to get back up, dust yourself off, and just stay in the fight. I absolutely love this way of thinking about it. Virtue is like a spiritual muscle. It's not something you just have or you don't. It is a habit you build over time. Every single time you intentionally choose a good action, you're doing a rep at the spiritual gym. And over time, that makes your will stronger, faster, and just more naturally inclined to do the right thing. But, of course, this isn't some simple workout with no resistance. Every good game has an opponent, right? And this inner quest is no different. If you want to win, you have to know who or what you're up against. And this framework identifies what it calls a triple adversary that every single one of us has to face. So here they are. First, what the tradition calls the devil. You can think of this as external forces of malice and deceit. Second, the world. This is all the cultural noise, the pressures, and bad influences that try to pull us off course. And then there's the third one, our corrupted nature. And notice that note there. This internal enemy, our own messy desires and bad habits, is seen as the most dangerous one of all. And this quote doesn't pull any punches, does it? It's a pretty blunt acknowledgement that this internal battle we're talking about, it's not some minor glitch. It's a deep-rooted challenge, a tendency that's been part of the human condition right from the very beginning. But here is the strategic genius of this whole plan. Think of our internal nature as a potential traitor inside the castle walls. If you can handle that internal enemy first, if you can get a handle on your own inclinations, the other 2 adversaries, the world and the devil, they lose their main way of getting to you. They're left struggling in vain. The real battle, the most important one, is always the one inside. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. A constant internal war against our own nature, that sounds exhausting and maybe even impossible. And here's the thing, the game plan completely agrees. It says that our own effort, while absolutely essential, is not enough to win. The thinking here is that our internal brokenness is just too deep to be fixed by willpower alone. So the strategy says we have to tap into a strength that's beyond our own. In this tradition, that strength is called divine grace. Honestly, you can think of it as the ultimate power-up in this spiritual game. You don't have to fight alone. And this isn't just some vague, abstract idea. The framework points to very specific, concrete practices to get this strength. Daily prayer, well, that opens up the lines of communication. The practice of confession is seen as a way to hit the reset button and get stronger against our weaknesses. And the Eucharist is viewed as a primary, direct source of this transformative power. So, we've got the game plan, our own hard work, knowing our enemy, and plugging into a higher power. But what does this actually look like in real life? Let's check out two very different stories that really highlight the two possible outcomes, the path of self-mastery versus the path of self-gratification. First, let's take a look at John's story. He chose the path of self-gratification. He had an internal struggle with lust, and that was fueled by an external adversary, the easy access to pornography from the world. He completely stopped putting in the effort. He neglected any acts of self-control, and he stopped praying. And the results? It was a disaster. It led to a downward spiral of deception and betrayal that completely shattered the trust in his marriage. Now let's contrast that with the story of David and Maria. They were hit with a massive challenge. After a surgery, their ability to be physically intimate was severely restricted. David's first impulse was to fight this, to feel frustrated. But instead of going down the path of gratification, he went all in on the game plan. He leaned into prayer and confession, and he poured all that energy into deliberate acts of selfless love for his wife. The outcome was nothing short of incredible. Their love was purified, and it led to a deeper, more profound union than they had ever experienced before. I mean, the contrast here could not be more stark. John's path, the one of neglect and secrecy, it led straight to separation and a lot of pain. David's path, defined by sincere effort, service, and patience, led to a deeper union and real peace. It's just a perfect example of how the choices we make on the inside create the reality we live in on the outside. Okay, let's just be honest for a second. This is a tough road. This path of self-mastery requires constant effort, and you have to keep getting back up when you fall. So it leads to the big question, why? Why even bother? Why get into this struggle in the first place? What's the real payoff? Well, the framework gives us three big motivations, and they're in order of importance. The number one reason is for God's sake, to honor our Creator. The second is for our own sake, because our deepest, most lasting happiness actually depends on this. And third, it's for our neighbor's sake. A person who masters themselves becomes a source of stability and good for everyone around them. And let's be really clear about something. The reward we're talking about isn't just some pie-in-the-sky thing for the afterlife. The promise is that putting in this work, this quest for self-mastery, brings real, tangible benefits in this life. It leads to what's called a true and permanent peace, that deep sense of well-being, right here, right now. So, we end right back where we started, with a question for you. Every single day, in all the choices you make big and small, you're playing a game. And the question this framework leaves us with is a really personal one. Which path defines your game? Is the path of self-mastery for a greater love, or the path of self-gratification for a fleeting pleasure? Which game plan is shaping your life?